Have you ever felt the world slowly fade away around you while lying helpless in a dark place? I remember the cold concrete against my fur, the distant sounds of footsteps that never seemed to stop, the occasional shadow passing by without a glance, the taste of dirt in my mouth mixed with something metallic, probably my own blood. The autumn air carried scents of fallen leaves and approaching rain, but I could barely lift my head to look at the gray sky above. I used to be just another street cat in Chicago, darting between the bustling legs of morning commuters, finding scraps near the local diner, and seeking shelter under parked cars when the storms came. My whiskers would twitch at the familiar scent of coffee and bacon wafting through the air, and my ears would perk up at the sound of kind elderly ladies who sometimes left out bowls of water. Life wasn't easy, but I knew how to survive, how to read the rhythm of the city streets. The concrete jungle had its own rules, and I learned them all. From the early morning garbage collectors who would shoo us away with their brooms, to the gentle restaurant owner who pretended not to see us slip through his back door on particularly cold nights. My tabby fur helped me blend into the shadows of alleyways, and my quick reflexes kept me safe from the occasional aggressive dog or speeding motorcycle. I wasn't living in luxury, but I was managing. That was before everything changed, before the day when survival became something more than just finding food and shelter. The memory of it makes my fur stand on end, the screech of tires, the flash of headlights, and then darkness. Not the comfortable darkness of a hiding spot, but the kind that swallows you whole, that makes you question if you'll ever see light again. The impact left me broken, but what came after was worse. I could hear them talking, their voices muffled through the haze of pain. Human words I'd learned to recognize over time. Problem, nuisance, get rid of. Through half-closed eyes, I watched as hands reached down to grab me, rough and uncaring. The world spun as they carried me, my body screaming in protest with every movement. The familiar sounds of the street grew distant, replaced by the crunch of leaves and twigs under their feet. They took me somewhere quiet, away from the busy streets I knew so well. The smell of damp earth and rotting vegetation filled my nostrils as they lowered me down. My broken body touched cold, wet soil, and then I heard the sound of earth being moved. Through the fog of pain and fear, I realized what was happening. They were burying me. Not deep enough to kill me quickly, but enough to make sure I wouldn't crawl back to their neighborhood. Hours passed like years in that shallow grave. The rain started falling, each drop a tiny hammer against my injured body. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond the way they should. The mud slowly seeped into my fur, chilling me to the bone. Every breath was a battle against the weight of dirt partially covering me. The world had never felt so vast and so suffocating at the same time. The sounds of the forest preserve changed as day turned to night. Crickets chirped their evening chorus, oblivious to my suffering. An owl hooted somewhere above, probably watching for prey, though I was too broken to be worth hunting. The darkness brought a different kind of cold, one that seemed to seep into my very bones. I wondered if this would be my final resting place, just another forgotten creature in the vastness of the city's outskirts. People continued to pass by on the distant trail. Their footsteps and voices would rise and fall like waves, never getting close enough to notice me. Some were having cheerful conversations, others arguing, a few walking their dogs who sometimes paused and looked in my direction before being pulled away. I wanted to cry out, to make any sound that might attract attention, but my voice had abandoned me just like everything else. The pain came in waves, sometimes sharp and overwhelming, other times a dull throb that seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. My whiskers picked up the vibrations of approaching footsteps, then their retreat, over and over. Each time, a tiny spark of hope would flare up, only to be extinguished as they passed by. The world had become a blur of sensations, pain, cold, hunger, and an overwhelming sense of abandonment. Time lost all meaning in that hole. The sun rose and set, warming my fur briefly before leaving me to the cold again. My throat burned with thirst, and my stomach had long since given up on reminding me about food. The rain had stopped, but the dampness remained, making every breath feel heavy and labored. I thought about my life on the streets, how even those difficult days seemed like luxury compared to this. Small insects crawled over my body, but I couldn't even twitch to shake them off. The smell of my own blood and dirt had attracted them, turning me into part of the forest floor while I was still breathing. A beetle paused near my nose, its tiny legs moving methodically as it explored what must have looked like just another piece of the landscape. I watched it with my one eye that wasn't swollen shut, envying its freedom to simply walk away. The city sounds were a distant hum from where I lay, like a reminder of the life I used to know. Car horns, distant sirens, the occasional rumble of the L train, all of it seemed to belong to another world now. My world had shrunk to the size of this hole, defined by the boundaries of pain and the small patch of sky I could see through the leaves above. Even the birds seemed to avoid this place, as if they could sense the sadness that had seeped into the soil. As another day began to fade, my thoughts became hazy. The pain was still there, but it felt more distant, like it belonged to someone else. I watched shadows lengthen across my makeshift grave, painting patterns on the ground that seemed to dance with the evening breeze. The thought crossed my mind that this might be my last sunset, and somehow that didn't seem as frightening as it should have. A new sound caught my attention, different from the usual passing footsteps. These were lighter, accompanied by a soft humming. My ears twitched slightly, the only movement I could manage. The footsteps paused, then changed direction. Something was different this time. The humming stopped, replaced by a sharp intake of breath. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, a shadow fell directly over me. Through my good eye, I saw her. A young girl with kind eyes that went wide with shock when she spotted me. Her gasp seemed to echo in the quiet forest, and for a moment, everything else faded away. She dropped to her knees beside my hole, tears already forming in her eyes. I wanted to run, to hide, to protect myself from more pain, but my body wouldn't move. All I could do was watch and wait. She was speaking softly now, words that melted together through the fog in my mind, but her tone was different from any human I'd heard before. There was no disgust, no annoyance, no fear, just concern and something else I couldn't quite identify. Her hands hovered over me, trembling slightly as if she was afraid to touch me and afraid not to. I closed my eye, waiting for whatever would come next. The girl's phone appeared in her hands, and her voice became more urgent as she spoke into it. I could hear the tears in her voice, the way it cracked and wavered as she described where she was. More footsteps approached, heavier this time. Running, adult voices joined hers, speaking rapidly. Through it all, she stayed right beside me, one hand gently touching the small patch of fur that wasn't covered in mud. My world was about to change again, but this time, something felt different. The last rays of sunlight caught in her tears as she promised me something in her soft voice. I didn't understand all the words, but somehow I understood their meaning. For the first time since I'd been thrown in this hole, I felt something besides pain and fear. I felt the tiniest spark of hope. The forest preserve was growing darker now, but lights were approaching. Flashlights, phone screens, the beam of what sounded like a car's headlights. More voices joined the first ones, speaking in urgent tones. Through it all, the girl stayed right where she was, her presence like an anchor in a storm. She kept talking to me, her voice steady despite her tears, and I found myself wanting to believe whatever she was promising. As the lights grew closer and more hands reached toward me, I gathered what little strength I had left. Something told me that this moment was important, that everything depended on what happened next. The girl's hand was still on my fur, warm and gentle, so different from the last hands that had touched me. As consciousness started to fade, I heard her make one more promise that seemed to wrap around me like a warm blanket. "You're safe now." Everything happened so quickly after the impact. One moment I was crossing the street like I had done countless times before, carefully timing my steps between the cars. The next moment, the world exploded into a cacophony of screeching tires, blaring horns, and searing pain. I remember the sound of my body hitting the pavement, the way the world spun in dizzying circles, and the terrible realization that I couldn't feel my back legs anymore. The first faces I saw weren't kind ones. Through the haze of pain, I watched as annoyed drivers got out of their cars, their voices sharp with irritation. Nobody seemed to care that I was bleeding, that every breath felt like fire in my lungs. Instead, they were angry about the traffic delay, about the inconvenience of having to slow down. One man approached, his heavy boots stopping inches from my face, and I heard him mutter something about taking care of the problem. I tried to get up, to drag myself away from these humans who saw me as nothing more than a nuisance. But my body wouldn't cooperate. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare where danger approaches but you can't move. The rough hands that grabbed me showed no concern for my injuries. They lifted me like I was garbage to be disposed of, my broken body screaming in silent agony as they carried me away from the street. The journey seemed endless, each step sending waves of pain through my battered frame. I caught glimpses of trees through my one good eye, realizing we were heading into the forest preserve that bordered the city. The humans' conversation drifted in and out of my consciousness. Words like, "can't leave it in the street," and "just let nature take its course." They were taking me somewhere to die, somewhere out of sight where I wouldn't be their problem anymore. When they finally stopped, I felt the cold earth beneath me. The hole they had chosen wasn't deep, just a natural depression in the ground that they made slightly deeper with a few kicks of their boots. They didn't even look at me as they pushed some dirt and leaves over my body, their actions quick and businesslike, as if they were simply taking out the trash. Then they were gone, their footsteps fading away, leaving me alone with my pain. The rain started soon after, turning the soil around me into mud that seemed to want to swallow me whole. Each droplet felt like ice against my injuries, and I couldn't even shift to find a more comfortable position. My broken ribs made every breath a struggle, and the taste of blood in my mouth grew stronger. The world had become a prison of pain and cold, with no hope of escape. Hours blended into what might have been days. The sun rose and set, but time had lost all meaning in my muddy grave. Thirst tormented me more than hunger. I could see puddles of rainwater just inches from my face, but I couldn't reach them. My tongue felt like sandpaper in my mouth, and each swallow brought the metallic taste of my own blood. The forest around me continued its normal routine, oblivious to my suffering. Squirrels chattered overhead, birds sang their morning songs, and insects crawled over my body as if I were already part of the decaying forest floor. Sometimes I would hear larger animals moving nearby, raccoons or foxes perhaps, but they kept their distance, as if they could sense that I was caught between life and death. The worst part wasn't the physical pain, though that was constant and overwhelming. It was the betrayal that cut deepest, the casual cruelty of humans who could so easily toss aside a living creature. I had always been cautious around people, but I had also known kindness from some of them. Now, lying in this makeshift grave, I wondered if I had been foolish to ever trust them at all. My injuries throbbed in time with my heartbeat, a constant reminder that I was still alive despite everything. The pain in my back legs had faded to a dull numbness, which somehow frightened me more than the sharp agony of before. When I managed to look at them, I could see they were twisted at unnatural angles. Even if by some miracle I survived, would I ever walk again? The forest preserve had its own soundtrack of suffering. At night, I would hear the distant cries of other animals, the sharp bark of a fox, the screech of an owl's prey, the rustle of small creatures fleeing from predators. Now I was part of this brutal world, but without even the ability to fight for survival. I was just waiting, trapped between life and death, for whatever would come next. Every passing hour brought new torments. Ants discovered my helpless body, their tiny feet like pinpricks across my skin. Flies buzzed around my wounds, laying eggs that I knew would soon hatch into maggots. The indignity of becoming a living feast for insects was almost as bad as the pain itself. I couldn't even twitch my tail to shoo them away. The temperature dropped sharply as night fell, and I felt my body begin to shiver uncontrollably. Each tremor sent new waves of pain through my broken bones and torn muscles. The mud that partially covered me had grown cold and heavy, making it even harder to breathe. I found myself drifting in and out of consciousness, never sure if I was waking up or slipping deeper into darkness. People continued to pass by on the trail, their voices carrying through the trees. Some were just feet away from where I lay, but the underbrush and leaves kept me hidden from their view. I wanted to call out, to make any sound that might attract their attention, but my voice had abandoned me along with my strength. All I could do was listen as potential rescuers walked past, unaware of my presence. Sometimes I would hear children playing nearby, their laughter a sharp contrast to my suffering. Their footsteps would come close, then veer away as their parents called them back to the path. One time, a dog started barking in my direction, pulling at its leash, but its owner just tugged it away with an impatient command. I was so close to help, yet completely invisible. The hunger was becoming unbearable. I had gone without food before during my life on the streets, but never like this. My stomach had moved past the point of pain to a hollow emptiness that seemed to echo through my entire being. The smell of decay around me, rotting leaves, damp earth, and now my own festering wounds, made me wish I could still feel nauseous. The second night brought new terrors. Something large moved through the underbrush nearby, a coyote perhaps, or a stray dog. I could hear it sniffing, probably drawn by the scent of blood and weakness. My heart raced with primal fear, but I couldn't even raise my head to watch for the threat. I lay there, helpless, as the creature circled closer, then mysteriously moved away. My thoughts began to scatter like autumn leaves in the wind. Memories of my life before this hole mixed with feverish dreams, warm sunlight on my fur, the taste of fresh water, the comfort of hidden sleeping spots I'd discovered throughout the city. These fragments of happier times only made my current situation more unbearable. Was this really how my story would end? The pain had become a living thing, with its own personality and moods. Sometimes it would recede just enough to let me think clearly, only to come crashing back with renewed intensity. My body felt like it was on fire and freezing at the same time. The wounds that I could see had turned angry colors, and I knew that infection was setting in. As the second day in the hole drew to a close, I felt myself slipping away. The world around me seemed less real, more like a dream that was slowly fading. The sound of footsteps on the trail had become meaningless background noise, no different from the rustle of leaves or the distant traffic. I had almost given up hope when I heard it. The light footsteps and soft humming that would change everything. The girl's gasp cut through my haze of pain like a shaft of sunlight through storm clouds. Her footsteps had been different from the start. Lighter, less hurried, with a kind of grace that made them stand out from the harsh rhythms I'd grown used to. When she spotted me, time seemed to stop. The forest fell silent, as if holding its breath. Even the pain momentarily receded, overwhelmed by this new presence that radiated something I had almost forgotten existed. Compassion. Her eyes were the first thing I truly focused on in what felt like ages. They were wide with shock, yes, but there was something else there too. A determination that seemed to push back against the hopelessness that had been consuming me. She knelt beside my muddy grave, her hands trembling but gentle as they hovered over my broken body. I wanted to flinch away, to protect myself from more pain, but I couldn't move. All I could do was watch and wait. Oh my God, she kept whispering, her voice cracking with emotion. Usually, human voices meant danger to me, but hers was different, soft and warm like summer rain. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, never taking her eyes off me. I heard her speaking urgently into it, words tumbling out between quiet sobs. Yes, I'm at the forest preserve, near the oak grove. Please hurry, someone buried it alive. The world around me began to blur and shift. But this time it wasn't from pain or despair. Her presence had somehow changed everything. The cold earth beneath me didn't feel quite as cold. The pain didn't cut quite as deep. She kept talking to me in that gentle voice, promising things I couldn't quite understand but desperately wanted to believe. One of her hands finally made contact with my fur, barely touching, as if she was afraid I might shatter. More voices approached, adult voices, urgent and professional. Flashlight beams cut through the growing darkness, illuminating my prison from different angles. I heard gasps of shock and anger, quick discussions about the best way to move me. Through it all, the girl stayed right where she was, her hand still touching that small patch of clean fur, as if she was anchoring me to the world of the living. We need to be extremely careful, a new voice said, older, male, carrying authority. The injuries look severe, and we don't know how long it's been here. They began to discuss logistics, medical terms, and emergency procedures. The girl's hand never left my fur, even as others began to work around her. She became my fixed point in a world that was starting to spin again. The process of freeing me from my earthen prison was agonizingly slow. Each movement brought fresh waves of pain, but there was something different about these hands. They were careful, deliberate, professional. Someone placed a warm blanket nearby, ready to receive me. Medical equipment appeared in my limited field of vision. The girl kept whispering encouragement, her voice steady despite the tears that occasionally fell onto my matted fur. "Almost there," another voice announced. "Keep supporting the spine, careful of those back legs." Their movements were choreographed with precision, each person knowing their role in this rescue operation. The girl had shifted slightly to give them room to work, but her hand remained in contact with me, as if she understood that this touch was the only thing keeping me from slipping back into darkness. Light suddenly flooded my vision as they finally lifted me free of the hole. The pain was incredible, but it was different now. It was pain with purpose, pain that meant survival rather than death. They placed me so gently on the waiting blanket, quickly checking vital signs and assessing injuries. The girl moved with them, never breaking contact, her presence a constant comfort in the chaos of activity. Everything became a blur of motion and voices after that. Someone mentioned an emergency veterinary clinic. Equipment was packed up, orders were given, and I felt myself being lifted once again. But this time, with such care, such gentleness. The blanket cocooned me in unexpected warmth, and the girl's voice remained close, a beacon in the storm of sensation and movement. The journey that followed was nothing like the rough handling that had brought me to the hole. Every bump and turn was cushioned, every movement calculated to cause minimal distress. The girl rode in what I assumed was an animal rescue vehicle, her hand still maintaining that crucial connection. The urban sounds I had grown up with returned. Traffic, sirens, the pulse of the city. But they seemed less threatening now. Bright lights and new voices greeted us at what must have been the emergency clinic. The air changed, becoming sterile, clinical, filled with unfamiliar scents. But the girl's scent remained, her presence unwavering, even as medical professionals swarmed around me. They spoke in quick, efficient bursts, using words I didn't understand but that carried hope in their urgency. Multiple fractures, severe dehydration, possible internal injuries. The list went on, but none of it seemed to frighten the girl. Her voice joined the discussion occasionally, recounting how she had found me, her words painted with determination rather than pity. She spoke about me as if I was already a survivor, not a victim. Something in her certainty made me want to prove her right. An older woman in medical scrubs finally approached the girl. "We need to take him into surgery now," she said gently. "You've done an amazing thing, but from here on out, you need to let us take care of him." The girl's hand trembled on my fur, and I felt her resistance to the idea of leaving. Strange, I felt it too, this reluctance to break the connection that had saved me. Can I come see him after?" the girl asked, her voice small but hopeful. The woman's response was warm, understanding. "Of course you can. We'll take good care of him, I promise. He's a fighter, you can see it in his eyes." I tried to focus on the girl's face one last time before they took me away, wanting to memorize the features of the person who had changed everything. The medical team moved with swift efficiency once the girl stepped back. New hands touched me, professional, clinical, but not unkind. They began preparing me for surgery, their movements precise and purposeful. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took hold was the lingering warmth where the girl's hand had been, like a promise that this wasn't the end. The darkness that followed was different from the darkness of the hole. This was a peaceful darkness, free from pain and fear. As I floated in it, I could still hear voices, muffled but determined, working to repair what had been broken. The girl's voice echoed in my memory, her promises mixing with my dreams. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't afraid to close my eyes. Time became fluid, measured in moments of consciousness between long periods of healing sleep. Each time I surfaced, there were gentle hands checking on me, soft voices offering encouragement. The pain was still there, but it was managed now, controlled by medication and care. I was clean, warm, and safe. 3 simple things that had seemed impossible just days before. Sometimes, in my more lucid moments, I would hear the medical staff talking about my progress. Words like remarkable and resilient floated through the air. They seemed surprised by my will to live, but I knew where it had come from. It had been born in that moment when a young girl refused to walk past, when she saw value in something others had thrown away. The girl visited every day. I could smell her unique scent, hear her distinctive footsteps. She would sit beside my cage in the recovery area, talking softly about anything and everything. Her voice became a constant in my healing process, something to look forward to, something to heal for. She never seemed to doubt that I would recover, and gradually I began to believe it too. When the doctors and nurses discussed permanent damage and limited mobility, the girl simply smiled and said it didn't matter. She spoke about a home where I would be safe, about a life where I would never have to fear being thrown away again. Her certainty was infectious, making the challenging road ahead seem less daunting. The warmth of her hope began to heal something deeper than my physical wounds. Recovery was a journey measured in small victories. The first time I managed to lift my head on my own, the medical staff celebrated as if I'd performed a miracle. Each small movement was an achievement, each step forward a triumph over what had been done to me. The pain was still there, but it was different now. Not the sharp agony of survival, but the steady ache of healing. My back legs would never work quite the same way again. The doctors made that clear in their quiet conversations. But they worked with me every day, using gentle hands and strange equipment to help me regain what strength I could. Physical therapy, they called it. I called it learning to live again. The girl was there for many of these sessions, her encouraging voice making me want to try harder, push further. The first time I managed to stand, even for just a few seconds, I heard the catch in the girl's breath. Her eyes filled with tears, but these were different from the ones I'd seen in the forest. These sparkled with joy rather than sorrow. The medical staff documented my progress with charts and notes, but the girl documented it with gentle touches and soft words of pride. Her belief in me never wavered, even when I struggled. Eating solid food again was another milestone. At first, it was just small amounts, carefully measured and monitored, but each successful meal was a step away from the weakness that had nearly claimed me in that hole. The girl would sit with me during feeding times, talking softly about her day, making the simple act of eating feel like a shared celebration rather than a medical necessity. My fur began to grow back where it had been shaved for surgery, covering the scars that mapped my journey. The matted, mud-caked coat that had been my shroud in the forest was replaced by clean, healthy fur that the girl loved to stroke. Each gentle touch helped erase the memory of those rough hands that had tossed me aside, teaching me that not all human contact meant pain. The nightmares came less frequently as time passed. I still sometimes woke up thinking I was back in that hole, but the sterile smell of the clinic and the soft blanket in my bed would quickly remind me that I was safe. The night staff learned to recognize these moments, offering quiet reassurance until the panic passed. Sometimes they would call the girl, and she would come even in the middle of the night, just to sit with me. Learning to walk again was the hardest part. My back legs moved awkwardly, refusing to cooperate the way they once had. But the physical therapists were patient, using supports and specially designed equipment to help me find my balance. The girl watched every session, celebrating each wobbly step as if it were a marathon completed. Her excitement made me want to keep trying, even when it felt impossible. The other animals in the clinic became a sort of community around me. There was a 3-legged dog who would wag his tail encouragingly when I practiced walking, a one-eyed cat who would purr supportively during difficult therapy sessions. We were all broken in some way, but we were all healing together. The girl would sometimes bring treats for everyone, turning the recovery ward into a place of joy rather than illness. As my strength returned, so did my curiosity about the world beyond the clinic walls. The girl would tell me about her home, describing a sunny window seat that would be perfect for napping, a quiet garden where I could safely explore, She spoke about these things not as possibilities, but as certainties, as if my place in her life had been decided from the moment she found me in that hole. The day they removed my last bandage was a turning point. The doctors spoke about remarkable recovery and exceeding expectations. My walk would always have a slight limp, they said, and I would need ongoing care for the rest of my life. The girl simply smiled and scratched behind my ears, as if to say that these weren't obstacles, but rather parts of who I had become. I began spending short periods away from the clinic, visiting what would become my new home. The girl had prepared everything: soft beds in quiet corners, ramps to help me navigate stairs, toys that accommodated my limited mobility. She had thought of everything, transforming her space into a sanctuary where my disabilities wouldn't matter. Each visit helped me understand that this wasn't just recovery, it was rebirth. The other humans in the girl's family gradually became part of my world too. They moved slowly around me, speaking in gentle voices, always respecting my space. Unlike the humans who had thrown me away, these people saw value in a cat who wasn't perfect. They celebrated my good days and supported me through the bad ones, never making me feel like a burden. My confidence grew with each passing day. I learned to compensate for my weakened back legs, developing new ways to jump and play. The girl would spend hours engaging with me, adapting games to match my abilities, rather than highlighting my limitations. Through her eyes, I wasn't disabled. I was differently abled, and just as worthy of love as any other cat. The clinic staff began talking about discharge dates, about me being ready to go home permanently. I noticed the girl spending more time in discussions with the doctors, taking notes about medications and physical therapy exercises. She was preparing for a lifetime of care, and somehow that didn't seem to frighten her at all. Her dedication made me feel not just saved, but cherished. One of the most profound changes was in how I viewed humans. The cruelty of those who had left me for dead was balanced by the kindness of those who had saved me. The girl taught me that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt, that not all hands brought pain, and not all voices carried threats. Through her, I learned to believe in humanity again. My story began to spread through the clinic and beyond. Other humans would visit, hearing about the cat who survived being buried alive. But they didn't see me as a victim. The girl wouldn't allow that. Instead, she told my story as one of triumph, of the power of compassion over cruelty. She made sure everyone knew that my scars were medals of survival, not marks of defeat. The physical therapy continued, but now it was focused on maintaining my strength rather than just recovering it. The girl learned all the exercises, preparing to continue my care at home. She approached each new challenge with determination and creativity, finding ways to make therapy feel like play. Her enthusiasm was contagious, making even the hardest tasks seem manageable. As the day of my permanent homecoming approached, I realized how far I had come from that dark hole in the forest. The pain and fear hadn't completely disappeared. They had transformed into something else, something that made me stronger. The girl's love had been the catalyst for this change, turning a broken street cat into a survivor with a purpose. The final checkup brought tears to everyone's eyes, happy tears this time. The doctors spoke about miracle recoveries and the power of love. The girl just held me close, her heart beating steady and strong against my fur. I knew then that while the hole in the forest had nearly been my grave, it had actually been the birthplace of something beautiful. A second chance at life, made possible by a girl who refused to walk past. My journey of healing wasn't over. It would likely continue for the rest of my life. But now I had something I'd never had before: a family, a home, and a purpose. Through my story, the girl helped other humans understand the importance of compassion, the value of every life, no matter how broken it might seem. What had started as a tragedy had become a testament to the transformative power of love. Looking back now from my sunny window seat, the memories of that dark hole in the forest seem like a distant nightmare. The warmth of the sun on my fur and the soft cushion beneath me are constant reminders of how far I've come. My body still bears the scars of what was done to me, the slight limp when I walk, the patches where my fur grows differently, the occasional ache when the weather changes. But these aren't marks of weakness anymore. They're badges of survival, proof that love can overcome even the darkest of circumstances. The girl who saved me, my girl now, still treats each day together as a gift. She never seems to tire of helping me navigate the world with my limitations, always finding new ways to make things easier for me. The ramps she built around the house, the special steps up to my favorite windowsills, the heated bed that soothes my old injuries, each one is a testament to her ongoing dedication. Sometimes I catch her watching me with tears in her eyes, but they're different from the tears I first saw in the forest. These are tears of joy, of gratitude for how far we've come together. My story has become something bigger than just my own survival. Through social media and the local news, people have learned about the cat who was buried alive and the girl who refused to walk past. Other humans come to visit, bringing their own rescue animals to meet me, sharing stories of hope and healing. My girl uses these opportunities to teach others about compassion, about the importance of stopping to help when they see suffering. She shows them that even the most broken beings deserve a chance at happiness. The clinic where I recovered has become a second home of sorts. We visit regularly, not just for my ongoing care, but to spend time with other animals who are going through their own healing journeys. My presence seems to give them hope, showing them that recovery is possible even from the darkest places. The staff still call me their miracle cat, but I know the real miracle wasn't my survival. It was being found by someone who saw value in what others had thrown away. Life has settled into a new normal now. My mornings start with gentle stretches to ease my stiff muscles, followed by the physical therapy exercises that have become almost like a dance between me and my girl. She's always there to support me when my balance falters, to encourage me when my strength wavers. The simple act of walking, which I once took for granted, has become a daily reminder of both my limitations and my resilience. The forest preserve where I was found is visible from my favorite window, but it no longer fills me with fear. Sometimes my girl and I visit the trail near where she found me, though we never go too close to that spot. Instead, we focus on the beauty of the present, the rustling leaves, the singing birds, the peaceful quiet. It's become a place of reflection rather than trauma, a reminder that even the darkest places can lead to light. My story continues to touch others in ways I never expected. Local shelters share my journey with potential adopters, showing them that disabled animals can live full, happy lives with the right care and love. Children write letters about how my story inspired them to be kinder to animals, to speak up when they see something wrong. My girl reads these letters to me, her voice full of pride, knowing that our journey together has created ripples of compassion in the world. The humans who hurt me were never found, but my girl chose to focus on healing rather than revenge. She channeled her anger into action, working with local animal protection groups to strengthen laws against animal cruelty and establish better response systems for injured strays. What was meant to be my ending became a beginning, not just for me, but for countless other animals who needed someone to stop and help. Each night, as I curl up in my soft bed beside my girl's pillow, I think about how close I came to never knowing this kind of love. The pain and fear of those days in the hole have faded, replaced by the warmth of belonging, the security of having a family. My purrs, once silenced by suffering, now fill our home with contentment. The girl who saved my life didn't just rescue me from death, she taught me how to truly live. From the depths of that muddy grave to the heights of this happy home, my journey has been one of transformation. It's a testament to the power of compassion, to the difference one person can make by simply refusing to look away from suffering. My girl often says I taught her as much as she taught me, but I know the truth. We helped each other find the best parts of ourselves. Together, we proved that even in the darkest moments, love can light the way home.